This is called waiting for it to get to 4:30 exactly. And we're there, all right. Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is June 17th, 2025 at 4:30 in the afternoon. We'll begin the city council work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
Mayor, members of the council, it always impresses me we have so many high school students in our attendance, even more so during summer vacation. And so while we have some great proclamations to read, they have currently on our agenda at the end. So council, Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we actually move those up on our agenda to after items after our consent agenda. So we have that listed as proclamations. A proclamation for Mountain View High School Girls State Track Champions Day, and then following that, Mountain View High School Boys State Track Champions Day. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Hey,
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted as amended. Up next is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Hey,
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so as was noted, we will move down to the podium for our proclamations. If I could have the coaches and the team join me at the podium, that would be great. And we can do them all, men and women at the same time, or we can do them separately. I'll let you all decide how you want to approach that.
and go.
That way, everyone out there can see it real good. Whatever works. Well, they're not gonna like spread out themselves. They like to get comfortable, so. All right, I think we're getting everyone squared away officially. So when these first came across my desk, they were one proclamation to begin with, but I said, no, we got to separate these out. So we're gonna read two proclamations, and I'll turn it over to the coaches for any comments. And afterwards, we'll ask each member to come forward and just state their name and what year you are in school and what activities or what events you participate in through that process. But as a proud Southside member, wearing my my kicks for the colors, it's about as close as I could get to for Mountain View. But love the fact that we get to have you all here today. So with that, we'll first do the boys proclamation. Whereas being a Mountain View High School boys track team member is more than sprints, relays, hurdles, field events, and achieving state titles. It is training to build leadership, character, confidence, teamwork, and resilience. All traits need to succeed on the field, in the classroom, and in the real world. And whereas the Mountain View boys track won the District 3 6A championship with a score of 117 points and stole the show at the Idaho State 5A 6A championship meet with 100-point score, allowed the Mavericks could knock off the 8-time defending state champion. And whereas multiple student athletes achieved personal records and contribute to an unforgettable team victory to bring home the first boys track and field state title in program history for Mountain View. And whereas the leadership training and discipline of their coaches helped all team members to focus their talents and passion, becoming a winning team, with each player making valuable contributions to their victory. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim June 17, 2025 as Mountain View's High School Boys Track State Champions Day in the city of Meridian, and call upon the community to join me in congratulating the Mountain View Mavs on their remarkable athletic achievement and for representing Meridian so proudly in the state tournament, the 17th day of June, 2025. So let's give a round of applause for them. And now we'll do the one for the ladies. Whereas being a Mountain View High School girls track team member is more than sprints, relays, hurdles, field events, and achievement state titles. It is trained to build leadership, character, confidence, teamwork, and resilience, all traits needed to succeed on the field, in the classroom, and in the real world. And whereas the Mountain View girls track and field team won the 6A meet with an impressive 93 points, making a statement that the Mavericks are the team to beat. And whereas multiple student athletes achieve personal records and contribute to an unforgettable team victory to bring home the first girls state title for the Mavericks since 2018. And whereas the leadership, training, and discipline of their coaches helped all team members to focus their talents and passion to become a winning team, with each player making valuable contributions to their victory. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim June 17, 2025 as Mountain View High School Girls Track State Champions Day in the city of Meridian, and call upon the community to join me in congratulating the Mountain View Mavs on their remarkable athletic achievement for representing Meridian so proudly in the state tournament, day the 17th day of June, 2025. We give them a round of applause. And now I'll invite the coaches up to say some words. I just want to say, I know it's summer, but we definitely appreciate everyone's time coming out today. So, coaches?
I just want to say thank you to the kids, and thank you to the mayor for this honor. I appreciate you.
My name's Cash and Jeanette. I did the 100, 200, 4x1, and 4x2.
I'm Tasia Johnson. I'm a senior and I ran the 4x2.
My name is Bo Stewart. I'm class of 27. I did the 100 long jump and the 4x1.
My name is Omar Osman. I competed in long jump.
My name's Quincy Keller. I did the 4x1, 4x2, 100 and 200, and I'll be a senior.
My name is Bear Scott. I did the 100, 200, 4x1, and 4x2, and I'll be a sophomore.
My name is Marcus Storr. I did the shot put and discus, and I'm a sophomore.
My name's Kelly Rice, and I did shot put. Senior.
My name's Kristen Geyser. I did high jump and I'll be a senior.
I'm William Walmsley. I was a pole vaulter and I'll be a senior.
My name is Austin Oots. I did triple jump and I'm going to be a junior.
My name's Keilana Burr and I'm a pole vaulter and I'm going to be a junior.
I'm Lydia Malin and I did pole vault.
I'm Jace Hart. I'm a senior and I did the 110 hurdles.
I'm Benjamin Jensen. I did the 1600 and 4x8 and I was a senior.
I'm Kellen Walbuck. I'm a senior and I did the long jump.
My name's Coda Van Dalen. I did the miles, 2 mile and 4x8, and I'll be junior.
right, with that, we'll move on to community center design update. Invite Mr. Sidway up.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm not sure I can top that, but I'll try. I shouldn't try. That was pretty cool. I just wanted to offer a few remarks before I turn the time over to Garrett for the actual formal presentation. But we thought it would be helpful to come tonight ahead of the budget discussion next week to give a design update, a project status update, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time answering design questions and project status questions when we want to do is focus on the budget next week. You'll probably find that not a lot has changed in terms of the big picture, right? It's still, the site plan looks very much the same. It's still the same uses, the same uses in the building, but we've been heavily focused with the architects on the details within that building, shifting walls a little bit to get the sizes right, making sure the IT room is the right size and shifting the wall between that and the storage and just on, different decisions that we've been trying to do to with the construction manager also involved to help us find ways to simplify some of the design elements, cut costs, stay within budget. We had a great meeting today, I'll just say, with the architect team. Fire and IT were also there. The progress on the plans is moving along really well. Things are on schedule, on track to be ready to bid this fall, which has been our timeline, and Garrett will go over the details of that timeline. But I was pleased to see that they're really been forward-thinking, planning ahead. Just one simple example, they know that we asked for we were saving space for a potential future gym expansion. Well, not only did they do that, but they've already sized the drain fields under the parking lot to be able to handle the additional drainage that would come from that expansion if and when it happens, so we don't have to tear up the parking lot and we can minimize disruption to the site when things and if things expand in the future. So it's great to see some of that forethought. We've also spent a lot of time on access control and to make sure that we have ways to use the building with contracted instructors when the building is unsupervised. And so, finally, staffing, which isn't a big part of the design, but I know it's a big deal to council, and we've talked about it before, but I just want to reiterate, because I know it's a big deal, that we've planned for a way to open this building by using just a couple of internal promotions so that we can grow into the facility over time as the budget allows. But with that, I'm excited about this project and its future and what it can mean for the community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Garrett, who's our project manager. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Steve. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me tonight. Chris, you've loaded that up, ready to go? Awesome, thank you. So I want to start off just by talking about the proposed timeline, like Steve said. We started last summer, fall of 2024 with the schematic design and kind of worked our way through, had some public outreach meetings, those types of things, and I kind of highlighted where we're at right now, which is City Council check-in the spring and summer of 2025. In doing that, like Steve said, we're going through the design development stages with a higher level of detail. Everything from, like Steve said, working with IT, going over where we want, badge readers to be on certain doors and lighting in certain classrooms and those types of items. Flooring in each classroom and each program and each flex space and those types of things. So we're really kind of getting into that. And like Steve said today, we had a pretty good meeting with our architect team and our internal team on that and kind of deciding what we really wanted to go with here on out. Through this presentation, I'll show you some elevations. I'll show you some different floor plan stuff that we went through. And like Steve said, not much has really changed the floor plan, but I'll kind of discuss kind of what we want to do in each room and why we're doing certain things, from ceiling heights to like I said, outdoor expansion, those types of things. Right here is the access control stuff that I got from IT. You can see all those different colored dots there mean something different. whether it be a badge reader to cameras, to wall data drops, to phone access, to where we're going to put our computers, all that kind of stuff, because the access control portion is very important to us. And the fact of, like Steve mentioned, we're gonna try to open this facility with only using 2 internal promotions, as well as existing staff to go over and staff it Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And in the evenings, we still will be using it with our instructors like we do our current basics and our current community center. And the fact of instructors will have badges to either a code to get in, those types of things, and they can have access control through that, as well as security cameras throughout the whole facility. So I'm just kind of want to touch base on that and kind of show you all the detail that's went through there. I'll show you a better floor plan here in a second without as many lines, but this just shows all the detail. This is a pretty quick slide I'm going to go over. The red line there is the fiber. So we have fiber now, we're getting ready to put fiber in through our park, and we're going to stub it up to right there close to the ball fields so that we'll be able to access fiber right there. Very little disruption as we do through construction. But that's just kind of our fiber line. And you can kind of see it go straight to the building, and it shoots over to the dog park restrooms in the fact of we want security cameras and stuff like that over there as well with access locks and things. So I want to make sure fiber got over in that area. Building elevations. So the top one there is from the west. So that's if you're looking at Venable, looking at the front of the facility. You can see that we have different elevations there. You can see the gym in the background, and it's not just a big plain wall there. It's literally has some character to it and some different colors, variations to it. The little colorful, I'll say, art piece there in front is really just, and I'll kind of touch base on the art piece a little bit later, but that is really just a placeholder for public art with that, and we'll be working with Stephanie Inman and Cassandra on that as well. The north elevation is basically if you're looking from Cedar Springs towards the facility. You see the gym wall there, and that looks like the fire outreach area there as well, kind of towards the right of that. The bottom one is from the east. If you're looking from the ball fields to the community center, again, on the back portion of that, you'll see that colorful piece. Again, that's another piece for public art or future public art with that, and kind of sees the landscaping there, or the building design there. The bottom piece obviously is looking now from the south, or where the dog park is on the site plan. You kind of see that the areas there, and again, some more of the design of the building and what it's going to look like. Here's the overall site plan that we tentatively have, and you'll see that it has a lot of parking. I will be meeting with MYB here on Sunday as their next board meeting to kind of try to finalize an agreement with them to help pay for that parking lot, the 2 parking lots there towards the ball fields. The big thing that we heard when we did the public outreach, as you guys know, we talked about before, was they really wanted to know about parking. So we're working with them, MYB, on that to get that completed. The whole site plan has about 347 spaces. The big thing we really want to do here is make it convenient for people that are using the ball fields to be able to park there, right? Because right now they're parking in Cedar Springs because it's convenient. So try to make it as convenient as possible, also by giving our park staff access through that parking lot as well to the main shop area that they have up there. Over on the dog park side, we've kind of did some value engineering on that and kind of shrinking the concrete area and making the shelters a little bit smaller here and there to kind of match where the restrooms are, and just kind of making that fit a little bit better for the small dog park and large dog park. And those will be planned to be very similar to what we do over at Story Park, where you kind of go from the concrete to gravel and to turf and those types of things, so that you can close certain areas during the winter when it's snow, but keep also some of the areas open. On the building itself, you can kind of see we did some different design in the concrete in the back patio. And as you move over to the north, I'll say, or to the left, kind of back around the building where the back side of the gym would be, we needed some fire ladder truck access there. And in doing that, you have to put a bigger concrete slab around there. And we originally wanted to be on the north side, or where that kind of turnout is by the Sally Port, on the left side of this picture, or the left side of the building there, if that makes any sense. Instead, we moved it to the back, and we put 2 half-court basketball courts in. One of the big things that I know I've heard in the last 15 years of being here is, why isn't there any basketball courts at Settlers? We have everything out there, but there's no basketball courts. So one thing we wanted to do is put some basketball courts out there too. And in doing that, it allowed us to kind of keep the same design on that north side or the left side of the building right there for the sally port for the fire to be able to pull in and pull out there. So we put two half-court basketball courts back there. And the reason why it's two half courts and not one full court is if you put the two poles in a different location, fire can't use it now because there's poles in the way. So we've made it two half-court poles there. So, and then you can see the dark area there is where the fire outreach facility is going to be. On the left side, on the open play space area, that's about as big as a soccer field, just for reference. And what we kind of did there was kind of put a berm kind of towards the bottom there or towards Venables to try to block something, you know, not necessarily big a fence or anything, but more of a berm to where it'll stop soccer balls from rolling too far, those types of things, to try to do that along with the pathway to provide some buffer between the homes there in Cedar Springs and the ball field there, or the open field space. So those are the types of things we've been doing regarding the site plan itself. One thing we're kind of really liking right now is the play structure. Since the last time you guys have seen this, we've shrunk the play structure to make it kind of a more unique play structure area. And you can kind of see the picture of kind of design right now of what that'll look like. I showed that picture to my youngest daughter who's 11. She's like, that looks pretty cool. You know, so kind of getting some value play out of that, but it looks pretty cool. So we're excited about that as we move forward through the design. One of the things too is we wanted connectivity again. So the pathways kind of connectivity all the way through it, but one again, kind of going back to the parking lot and convenience. So we wanted some connectivity from I'll say the north parking lot up by the shop. We have pathways going into the park to connect to existing ball fields. And then one over here on the south parking lot also connects over there between a couple of the ball fields there as well. So we wanted, again, 3 different connectivity points from those parking lots to the ball fields, again, for convenience for people to park. Next slide is really the floor plan. And as I go through this, I'll probably just kind of work from the right over to the left. So on the top right of the building right here is our yoga room, or kind of a smaller fitness room. That room's going to be more soundproof, for lack of better words there. And so it's harder to, if you're having yoga, you want it quiet, because the room right next to it is the exercise room where you're going to have the jazzercise classes and those types of things. So we're very cognizant of the fact that we want sound not to travel very far between rooms. Just across the hall from those 2 rooms, you'll have a cooking kitchen classroom that we could have there, and that has all the tables and stuff there on the bottom right of the picture here. We kind of set it up to where you have a big cooking island right there for where you can teach from and those types of things. But we also have it to where there's a curtain kind of comes across there to where you can use as a dual purpose into another classroom itself, if need be, and just turn the tables around however you want them into another classroom area. But it gives us that flexibility for cooking classes or regular classes during that time. Kind of moving there on that same side of the hallway, you have the arts and crafts room that kind of leads into a kiln room. We plan on having 2 or 3 kilns in there for just different pottery classes and arts and craft stuff, working in there. A lot of storage as well. Into the restrooms, and kind of getting back to the access control. Like I mentioned before, I don't know if my mouse can kind of see where I'm showing here, kind of. Right here where my mouse is, that's one of the access control doors. So we can split that wing off of the community center if need be. Like I explained a couple months ago, to where one side will be kind of the education wing, to where instructors will be able to get in that far south door and be able to get in there and access their classrooms however they want. The middle section where the offices and lobby stuff are is going to be able to be separated and blocked off, so people can access that area. And then as I move more to the left, we obviously have mechanical, office, some storage areas and stuff like that into the lobby area. And then on the right, you can kind of see my mouse here. Here's the other access control door to kind of separate that wing from the rest of the building as well. So on that side, we obviously have a big flex space that has the ability to have pickleball, basketball, volleyball. We have a stage on the end of it, so you can have some kind of a smaller special event when it comes to Treasure Valley Children's Theater or Huckleberry Theater, or those types of accesses to that as well when it comes to the stage and storage areas there. So the idea is to have that available, and when I've talked to like the Treasure Valley Children's Theater and those types of groups, they were like, love the space, love to have the ability to be actually use a space like that, to have it accessible to us. We appreciate the flexibility that you're having with this flex space. Talk to them about stage size. This is about what they need and what they want, kind of on the smaller side, but they said we would love to use whatever we can. So they were appreciative of that size of a space as well. They said it's more about the width than is the depth, but this right here, just for reference, you're looking at about a 24-foot width of the stage and about 20 feet deep, and maybe a little bit bigger. So that worked very well for them. On the other side of the gym space from the hallway is another classroom. We wanted to put a classroom over there in case in the future we wanted to have a summer day camp or whatever. We could have a day camp there where they have access to the gym and classroom as well. But it's just a standard multi-use classroom, and then you have the fire and outreach area on that other side. So that's kind of the floor plan. Not much has changed, like I said, since last time I talked to you, but I kind of wanted to talk to you about kind of how it is and what we're designing in through there. We've talked about cabinets, storage, cabinet size, ADA sinks, restrooms, however we want everything and where it should go for that. So getting in a lot of the detail. The next slide I have here is just potential art locations. Like I kind of mentioned before, we worked with Stephanie Inman as well as Cassandra Sifler, our arts and culture coordinator, to kind of look at future areas for public art. We kind of took that in front of the Arts Commission and said, hey, where would you guys prioritize these things and this and that? And this is kind of the list they came up with. The welcome entry piece is kind of that front colored picture I told you guys about when you first walk in. Could be any kind of thing. The lobby installation, and this picture here to the right kind of shows a history wall. As you walk in the front door, this is the lobby you'll be looking into, and that's just kind of a mock-up. It's not Meridian's history, but it's similar to what we could see there if it came to the history side of that thing. And what we really wanted to do is have this public art kind of tie into the theming of Settlers, right? The Settlers Park and Settlers past in the history here. And then we have just different hallway interchangeable displays and those types of things. Some of the things we're looking at doing too is just wayfinding when it comes to like, well, if I rent the gym at night, you can obviously see the big gym and where you should go, right? But if you're not sure where the classroom is, the gym side could be the blue side and the yellow side on the right side where the classrooms are. So we're looking at different wayfinding signage and stuff as well when it comes to the future public art and how we can tie that stuff in. So with that, I'll stand for questions and feedback.
Thank you, Garrett. Council, questions, comments? Donations?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
I want to make sure I'm tracking with this. Really questions about just the design for today. Other questions about the community center as part of our budget process. Is that what you're looking for?
Sure. I mean, I have some answers for you, I'm sure. If you wanted to know some before budget, I can try to answer some of those. But
Mr. Mayor, maybe just one so I'm making sure I'm tracking. You and Steve did a great job meeting with council all before the end of the year and talking about what an operational plan would look like for this facility. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you're anticipating then roughly about $300,000 in increased cost to be able to operate this facility moving forward. Plus as staffing needs grow, or has that number changed?
I think we've been talking about like a full subsidy when it comes to staffing and expected revenues and stuff, that being about 150,000 roughly a year. After revenues and everything bringing in.
Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure I'm
Councilman
hearing things right. Only $150,000 in an increased cost, meaning what we're paying now, we open this facility, it's going to cost us $150,000 more to operate it than us not operating it.
That's the projection, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I just put the slide up here, I thought I might get a question like this. I wanted to be somewhat prepared for it. So staffing, like Steve had mentioned before, we're trying to do it with 2 promotions and moving existing staff over. So that existing staff in today's dollars is about $101,000 worth of promotion between those 2. As you kind of go down, the total O&M, we're looking at about 44,000 and some change and so on as we go down that list. A lot of those are still kind of, they're good estimates based on what we have at home court and other city facilities. The electrical, gas, janitorial, those are kind of still, again, good educated guesses based on what we have at home court and those types of things. The janitorial portion of it, it really depends on, are we cleaning it 3 days a week, 7 days a week, 4 days a week? I do know that we're looking at other revenue sources as well, that we haven't necessarily looked into yet for this facility, but those revenue sources are a beverage contract potentially in the future, or advertisements in the facility, on the scoreboards in the gym, or those types of things we haven't looked at. Those are drops in the bucket at the end of the day, but everything adds up. Like you said, every dollar matters. So we're looking at all of that stuff.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Garrett, thanks. This is a better number than I anticipated seeing, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then just because you had touched on some of the amenities that are going to be installed within the facility, kitchen equipment, kilns. So as I understand right now, if I'm teaching a community class, and I say the class costs $50, we say, okay, it's $50 then plus an administrative fee. Do we anticipate evolving our fee structure because there's a different cost to the city to purchase a kiln and operate that versus gym space for a Zumba course or a volleyball clinic, et cetera? So how is the department planning to handle that? Because there are added costs to the taxpayer to purchase these items, and we want to make sure that when you guys are taking into your fee recovery, that we're taking those into account as well. So I assume you've already contemplated that and have a good explanation for me so I can have some good confidence.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, Councilman Cavanagh, yeah, we can look at all of our programs when it comes to a cost recovery philosophy and all of our cost recovery items. Right now, if we were to have an art class, we don't hire an instructor as a city employee. We contract them out, as you know. The current split is a 70-30 split that we have there. The instructor gets 70%, we get 30%. So if we need to sit down and really look at those numbers and say, okay, if it's going to cost us X, Y, and Z to have these kilns, do we look at a 60-40 split? I know it depends on what others are doing to make sure we are covering our costs, but we do want to cover our costs the best that we can, yes.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think that's important. I think that the cost I look at it, that is the split, is to cover with a city facility, right? It's a facility and an administrative charge. This is an amenity that we are specifically purchasing for those vendors. And so I do look at that the cost is different, and it would be really important to me that any fees that we put together for these programs contemplate that as well.
No, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Scher.
just to confirm, outside of the operating cost, still planning to pay for the construction of this facility with impact fees?
Mr. Mayor, yes, that is absolutely correct.
Okay. And then help me understand what, I'm not advocating for this at this point, but what would a delay cause at this point? If we get through our budget, and even though listen, an incremental operating cost of $150,000 relative to our budget is not hugely material. Like, I'm shocked and very amazed at what the team has managed to put together in terms of a very marginal increase in our operating costs using all of our existing staffing. But I just want to understand it. It doesn't have to be in this meeting, but when we get to budget time, I want to understand the push and pull of what a delay of a year would mean for this facility. Yeah.
Great question, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Strader, so talking to a construction manager, considering all the things that are going on in the valley right now, construction-wise, they estimate between 5 and 10% a year in inflated costs. So our budget request right now is $19.7 million. And do the math, whatever, if it's 5%, it is what it is. So it could be anywhere from $1 million to $2 million each year in inflated costs.
Thank you. That's helpful. If you, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Scher.
if you wouldn't mind, if you have more precision around that by the time we get to budget time, I think it would be helpful, for sure. And then just to kind of come back to the design and the concept. So this operating budget assumes, if you could just run through it with me again, this is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So this wouldn't be full service to the level that we would want to get to eventually on weekends and stuff like that, right?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, correct. Yeah. So what this does is our staffing model right now would be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, like you had said. Access control in the evenings, like our Bay 5, or Bay 6, Bay 5, and the current community center are. We could rent it to a youth basketball group or adult basketball group, whatever it may be, and we would set it up, get a badge. They could access the gym at 8 o'clock at night if need be. however we wanted to do it, to where we could make sure that there's still access control, to where we can still use the facility into the night, into the evening, so.
Mr. Mayor, one more.
Councilman Schrader.
While you're exploring other potential sources of revenue to help offset the operating costs, I was curious if you all have considered rental revenue as, renting the facility out to groups and so forth, if that's been a part of what you're exploring.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, Councilwoman Strader, yeah, absolutely. We're open to all of that revenue source at this point. Because we really don't have a rental room, what we would do is, again, look at different rental rates around the comparables and come back with you guys during a fee schedule and do fees, stuff like that. And then if the classes aren't being used with a youth class or whatever it may be, or adult class, then absolutely, if somebody wanted to use it for an HOA meeting or whatever it may be, absolutely we'd be able to try to rent something.
Mr. Mayor. Oh,
I think Steve wants to continue to answer.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I was going to add to that just briefly. We were originally anticipating a much bigger rental structure and being in a kind of an event center and trying to host weddings and things like that. We brought that to council 3-4 years ago and we're told, don't do that. So we've certainly pared back on the idea of what it might be rented for. We got rid of the catering, kitchen, warming area. We got rid of some of the things from the earlier concept based on previous council feedback. That said, this thing is flexible to be able to be rented in different ways as the council may see appropriate in the future. I'll just.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, my feedback so far, I love the design. I feel like that aspect is on the right track. I've always been a proponent of this, but the only question I've been continuously asking myself is what is the right timing? So that's my feedback so far. I think we need to get into our budget discussions and really dig into those because there obviously is a much broader context for this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Saylor.
Garrett, thank you. Great presentation. Like what I'm seeing so far. Just one pretty simple question. It's related to Meridian Youth Baseball and sort of the parking arrangement. I know you're going to be meeting with them and working on it. My question, I guess, is it our understanding or their understanding, if they're going to help to pay for some of the parking that will be provided, is that parking in the back going to say reserved for Meridian Youth Baseball parking? Is it just going to be open for all? I just kind of want to know what the expectation or understanding is at this point.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Taylor, yeah, it'll be open, first come, first serve, all the way around through the whole parking out there as well. Nothing's going to be specifically reserved for them because we want it to be public use, not just for Meridian Youth Baseball. Part of the agreement is to show that those fields can be used by the public and not just MYB. We want to make sure that the city's using those fields for our Wooden Bat Senior League now. We're using it. I want to designate times and show different times so where it's not just Meridian Youth Baseball using it. It is a park. It is on city property. The city puts a lot of money into that, so we want the public to be able to use it. So to have it designated times or designating for parking lot is right now it's just open. That's just a first come, first serve type of thing. Very similar to the other parking lot, that's existing over there off of U Stick that, people use it for tennis and pickleball and other just park uses. We want the same through the whole parking lot. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Garrett, Steve, and your whole team, just kind of a comment here. I appreciate all you've done keeping us up to speed on this project from the moment this site was selected to where we're at today. I'm going to comment on something that I don't normally ever comment on, and that's the art. I like what you just said with Stephanie and Cassandra working on the art. I mean, we're sitting in the middle of Dairy Days Week, our 96th year since 1929, celebrating our history. And the fact that we're looking at art that helps to celebrate the past and where the city came from couldn't make me happier. I don't get into a lot of the flowers and other type of art all the time, but that type of art I can really relate to, and I appreciate you looking at that for the building. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Whitlock.
Garrett, thanks. I know this was a back pocket slide in case a question came up on operational costs, but there is a note that says Settlers Park expansion will have similar O&M costs. Can you explain that line?
Yeah, so I'm focused more on the community center itself and what it's gonna cost. But the park expansion itself also comes with a little bit of operation and maintenance costs as well. We can get more into that in the budget stuff, but it does come, there's some one-time cost up front that's closer to $50-ish thousand one-time costs, and then after that, it goes down to very similar to, I don't want to quote a number. I don't know if Mike wants to come up and quote a number on the park side or not, but if that's something we can get more into in the next week in the budget stuff, but there will be some more operating costs for the park itself as it would.
Mowing, all the normals. I think next week we can cover the more details, so you have the slides, would show the case, all that information, but just have understand these are community center costs, not park operational costs.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Mohawk.
Explain the word similar.
Sure.
What threw me off. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't similar to the 150,000 annual operational cost.
It is.
Okay. So the expansion of the park itself will have about 150,000 in added.
Roughly, yes.
You didn't want to quote a number.
Yes.
Council, any additional questions, comments? Thank you, Garrett, very much. We'll have to look and feel on paper.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and you can probably just stick around for the next one. Okay, and the next item up is home court fee discussion. Let's see if we can make up that $300,000 to help pay for that operational cost.
Chris, do you mind pulling up do you have the? Okay. Just whatever's online. That was in the packet. Please. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Sorry to put you on the spot there. So home court. So as you guys all know, that the users of home court are all kinds of youth, adult, seniors, all the above when it comes to the noon ball basketball. Pickleball's big in the morning. We have a bunch of community education classes over there. We have some basketball tournaments, volleyball tournaments, martial arts tournaments. It's a very well-used facility. Just day passes, looking at the 2024 volumes, that's the last full year that we had. So looking at those volumes, we had almost 49,000 just day passes sold, check-ins, which is the current day passes I'll get into are $2, $3, and $4 based on where you live and your age. But the membership sold as well. We're at about 3,400, a little over that, that use that. Those are primarily noon ball and pickleball in the morning, and then evening drop-in play as well. So that's kind of just want to kind of go over the users and who's using it. When it comes to fees, our fees were adopted back when we bought the facility, September 30th of 2016. And we adopted the fees that the YMCA currently had, because that's who we bought it from, and a lot of the same users came over to use it, so we didn't want to have any kind of a price change for them as the transfer came over. And if you remember right, we lived with them for about 18 months while they were building South Meridian Y. So those fees, just in talking with some of the YMCA membership, back then those fees were already kind of established. So I don't know when those actually were established, but we adopted them in 16. So I don't know if they adopted them in 14 or 15 or not, but they're years back. So in doing that, we want to look at price increases. And really what it is we want to try to keep up with the subsidy and the cost recovery of the facility. The cost recovery is not where we want it to be. We want our cost recovery to increase. And in doing that, we're looking at so many different ways of trying to increase that cost recovery philosophy there. But in doing this, the fees are going to be the ones that really help us do that. So our proposal really is to raise the fees in two different phases. Phase one would be to raise it from 2, 3, and 4 to 3, 4, and 5. And then have the membership increase with the same ratio, the break-even point of 7 is kind of what it is currently. So we want it to be kind of match that. So we would increase the membership to a 21, 28, and 35 proposal. On top of that, we also want to make sure that those that are using the facility, renting the facility to where the public can't necessarily use it, want to make sure they pay their fair share as well. The current rate right now is $45 an hour after tax to reserve one basketball court for like a youth basketball practice or whatever it may be. Because the public can't use it, we want to make sure that they're paying their fair share. So our proposal to raise that to $65 for practices. And then if you're closing the whole facility and making sure the public can't use it for the whole facility, for day drop-in passes, we want to raise that to an event fee of $75 per court. That's our proposal in doing so. And like I said, those fees, the original fees have been in line for about 10 to 15 or 10 years now. So in phase two, which we would want to come back to you in phase two in the next summer to kind of explain those to you and see where we're at when it comes to cost recovery and stuff. But phase two, the idea right now is to then raise it again another $1 for the day pass fees. And again, the memberships to keep that same ratio of 7 with that. And we'll, again, for phase two of the fee increase, we would again review what our costs are when it comes to practice rentals, where we're at in our numbers and our volumes based on 2025 and 2026. Before I started talking about fees here, I probably should have said that, right now, today, I'm really not looking for any action from you guys. I'm more looking for feedback, head nods, thumbs up. And really what'll happen is if we're all kind of good with this proposal, we'll post them and come back for a public hearing on this. So this is more of me just giving you guys information on what our proposal would be. If you look at our current cost recovery, like I said, it's not where we want it to be. We want it to improve and want it to grow. In FY23, our cost recovery is approximately 49%, and those are actuals I got off from our finance department. FY24, same thing. It kind of went down. Wages go up, costs go up. We went down to 45%. And then in this year in FY25, we're projected to have a 38%. So again, we want that to be higher. We need it to be higher. So we're looking at different ways in doing that. I think fees are our first step because they haven't really been raised in 10 years. Again, these are projected numbers based on FY24 volumes. So keep that in mind when we're going through this. And the one thing I did want to point out there, and I kind of showed that, we had a decrease in revenues from FY24 to FY25 projected. The church moved out. They were providing some lease payments and stuff like that for the base 6 area. So that was a chunk of revenue decrease there. The FY26 and FY27 phase increases, those are based on FY24 numbers. Don't want to be held to those in particular, but this is FY24 number stuff is the best data that we had to come up with those numbers. With that, to lower our subsidy, increase revenues, staff has talked about increase in day passes and memberships, like it on low volume times. Do we really need to stay open if there's only a handful of people in there? Yes, we want the facility to be accessible to people to use and those types of things, but we're really monitoring that as well. Hourly court rates, we want to make sure a portion of that goes to help pay for the home court facility. So we're working on doing that as we speak to try to transfer that over. A specific percentage needs to go and pay for that facility in that area. operational costs, again, our janitorial costs were just going way high because that building is obviously used quite a bit. So one thing we did is we worked with Max Jensen and his team and the cleaning company, and for the next budget year, we were reduced that to 75,000. So we were already in a good start. We lowered it about $60,000 from the anticipated stuff. So we're already working on that. Just this year, we're saving 52,000 for the FY26 and maybe more. Additional revenues, kind of like Councilwoman Strader said before, we're looking at different ways to either bring in revenues, rent the facility for more events, those types of things during the summer when the low use times are. Sponsorship program, I know Councilman Taylor mentioned like way back when with sponsorships on ball fields and stuff like that. Why can't we do that in the gym areas and gym spaces? So we're looking into that as well to get more revenues coming in when it comes to just signage up on the scoreboard or signage below the scoreboard or in the facility somewhere. Not looking for a big billboard area, but just more of just strategically sponsored areas that we can bring in revenues there as well. And then we're looking at a potential beverage contract with a different Coke company, Coca-Cola company, or some kind of a drink company to where we can get exclusivity in home court or maybe at Settlers Park and working with Meridian Youth Baseball and those types of things for all of our concessions in our parks to where we can sell those certain things. And some of those revenues can go to a home court, to a pool, to a community center, those types of things in the future. So we're looking at different ways of doing that to really try to lower the subsidy and increase our revenues at home court. So timing wise, like I said, tonight I'm just really to get feedback from you guys. Do you like the proposed fee increases? Do you want to comment, give us feedback on those? And if so, like I said, we would post those fees, come back to you guys in a few weeks, have a public hearing, let public weigh in on it. We'd want the phase 1 fees, if they were to be approved and done, we would want them to start in September 1st or right around there. And the reason I say that is that's right after we close the facility for the annual floor resurfacing. So it was closed for 2 weeks. And this year we have the HVAC replacement project as well. So in August. So this also gives us, so right when those projects are done, we open and the new fees are established potentially. But it also does, it gives our staff the next month and a half to be able to communicate with staff, with people, different users of the facility. Hey, these are coming, plan on them. Just let's just communicate that. And then, like I said before, phase 2, if we were to look at phase 2 to try to increase our revenues and things like that for next year, which I'm sure we will, we'd come back to you guys next summer, similar to what I'm doing right now. Here's our proposal, get feedback, and then do the same public hearing process. So with that, I'll stand for questions, feedback, head nods. If we're good, we'll post the phase 1 fees as proposed, like I said, and come back. But right now I'm just looking for feedback and for thoughts.
Mayor?
Thank you, Garrett. Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, Garrett, pretty simple question, I think. Just in thinking how it'd been, 9 years or so since we since we adopted the fees and we hadn't raised them. Don't really need to get into why we didn't raise fees over that time, but I'm looking at having, we got 2 phases of raising the fees. Certainly in the future, I would still anticipate needing to raise fees as costs go up. So why not why would you propose 2 phases right now instead of just saying, here's what we'd like to propose for this year, and then come back a year from now and say, here's what the new fees would be? Because there's kind of I don't think you mean to imply, but I read it and I kind of think, well, we're going to do two adjustments, and then are we done for a little while? I'm just kind of wondering why not just focus on the fee increase for this year, and then we can come back next year in phase 2 when you do it and consider what that fee structure would look like.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Taylor, I'll try to answer that. So really what it came down to is we're basically almost going to, phase 2 doubles our current fees. So in doubling our, yes, they're small, it's $2, $3, $4, and it goes, if we were to go, the phase 2 fee goes to 4, 5, and 6. So it basically doubles or come close to doubling that. To keep our same volumes, we didn't really want to just put it up right now on lower volumes. So we're trying to be strategic about it and raising it and trying to keep volume, grow that into it, if that makes any sense. That's really the purpose behind it.
of trying to get recovery above percent. Wanted it. We're trying to as close to full recovery, but when we were looking at steps, jumping it from 2, 3, 4 to be 4, 5, 6 just seemed like too much for one. Said that our proposal is to go to that 4, 5, the second phase. I mean, we are proposing that, but we would formally bring that back. But the idea is to bring it to you as a two-step process to get where we're going, where we're trying to get to, if that makes sense.
Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I have a couple questions, but maybe starting with how many non-resident memberships do we sell approximately per year? Just kind of curious, like rough numbers. Yeah, thank you.
So right there kind of gives you a breakdown of them.
Would you mind going, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind? If you wouldn't mind going back to the phase 1 and phase 2, yeah, fee structure. My feeling with it generally is if we're keeping it at $5 and below for all of our residents, I think that's a phenomenal value. I actually think it would be okay to go directly into phase 2 proposed fees if that's the objective you need to meet, as opposed to phasing this in, because our cost recovery got so far off track of what we need to be targeting that I actually just think this level of complexity is not needed. I think we should consider just going directly into the phase 2 proposed fees. My sensitivity actually would be more around our residents' fees. I care a lot more about that. I think the city of Meridian is subsidizing this so much that if anything, I think the non-resident fees going above $5, I'm okay with that. It's really for our residents that I just want to see those at 5 or below. I still think that's a phenomenal value. So just to maybe feedback for me is I'm a little bit more flexible on the phase 1, phase 2. I think if we've gotten that far off track that we're subsidizing this much, maybe it might make sense to go further actually than you're proposing.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Garrett, appreciate the update. And I'm gonna correct you just a little bit because you said something that I don't think you meant to intend, which is that first thing you went and did is look at increasing the cost of fees. And I don't think that's accurate. I think actually you and the team first went and looked at reducing expenses. And I want to commend you for that. I think that it's always easy to say, let's just raise the rates and continue on. You said, no, let's see what we can be doing about the cost that we're expending. I want you to know how much I appreciate that. My question is a little bit of, to quote the great Councilmember Davis, but maybe a sideways question. Do we at the city provide a discount to nonprofits, whether they reserve a ball field, a class, a lesson, anything like that? Do we delineate between for-profits, individuals, and nonprofits?
No.
Okay. I don't think it's an exercise for now, but I apologize. You come and answer one question. I challenge you again. It's for us to look at over maybe the next year as we prepare for our fee schedule for next year, to look at what options and what the impact would be to our revenues if we offered a different rate structure for nonprofits. Recognizing like some of our larger scale renters, I think of PAL, Hoop Dreams, those are nonprofits. But I think being able for us to at least consider something like that could be a difference maker. They're providing a valid service that meets a need in our community that we're not having to provide. And if we can partner with them, I think it's something that's at least worth exploring. So appreciate your great work on this. I look forward to and I think council, maybe a discussion is, do we want to post fees with the phase 2, and then we can have a discussion at the public hearing about that and ultimately land on something. In light of hearing from a couple council members, that may be the more prudent, just because that's what we published doesn't necessarily mean that's what we would approve. So I appreciate the good discussion. I appreciate bringing this presentation.
Yeah, and you're right. We went through all of our operating costs, tried to cut those before we raised fees, obviously. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
to belabor the point too long, but I hadn't considered it coming in tonight, but I actually think I agree a little bit with what Councilwoman Schrader mentioned about we're essentially adopting phase two, or we're saying we want to get to phase two. And I appreciate the goal behind kind of phasing into it, but really what we want is phase two. I would rather just say that's what we're going to charge, because I like the practice we have with our other fee structures we have in the city, where we propose it, we look at it, we hear it, we adopt it kind of on an annual basis. I would prefer to do that. I'd prefer to say, I mean, essentially we're looking at, we want phase two to get to the goal of the cost recovery. I don't like kind of sort of this doing the phased approach, because I know we're trying to make up time for several years of not having made any adjustments. So I think I would probably, if, and I'm not sure where everyone else, if they agree with that, but if that's what we're trying to get to, then let's have a hearing on that. Let's propose that and let's discuss that. I think that's a more straightforward way of doing it. I know we're trying to make up for time. I don't like voting or approving a phased approach over a couple of years. If it was over a couple of months, maybe that's different, but I would rather just say this year, this is what we're gonna look at for fees. Next year, if we want to adjust those fees, what would it look like? That would be my preference.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Will Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, Garrett, thank you so much for your presentation. I think even if we go with phase two, it's still one of the best values available. Question for you, do you have any pricing regarding like the larger basketball tournaments and things, what they pay elsewhere? I'm thinking that $75 per court is still the deal of the century, knowing how much parents and grandparents and spectators pay to come watch those kids play. Especially if we fold in a discount for nonprofits, because we know we've got some pretty profitable teams in this valley.
Mr. Mayor, so yeah, so what others like comparable ones, like it's the metal facility over in Nampa. They are a big 4 basketball court, indoor facility, very similar to home court, just a little bit different layout. They're all multi-purpose floorings. Ours are hardwood. They charge an hour per court is almost $64 an hour after tax. So we're gonna be right there. We think our facility with being hardwood floors, kind of a great place to play. We think it's worth the $75 as well. That's why we propose that, a portion of that. And our practice fees would be basically right at the $65 is what we're proposing after tax. To get to the same as there. The Treasure Valley Athletic Club is the same price as metal. So they're right close to $64 an hour for their courts. And again, they're multi-purpose flooring as well, and it only has 3 basketball courts inside. So as a tournament director, I used to run the sports leagues around here. I kind of, you want as many fields and courts or in one location as possible, right? So having the 4 is really nice. So we agree. So to answer your question, $64, $65 is what they're charging.
Great.
Per hour per court.
Thank you. Still think we're the best value around.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Whitlock.
Garrett, thank you for the presentation, and we've spent a lot of time in your conference room, and I can share with my colleagues that you've really left no stone unturned, and you've looked at every option, so we appreciate that. In some of those meetings, Jake and others have offered some informal, unscientific polling data as we've talked to residents who come on a regular basis and have come for the last 9+ years on a regular basis. And they've talked about the deal of the century.
Yeah.
And the opportunity, and almost asked, when are you going to raise the fees? So we'll wait and see how the public responds to it, but I think the feedback that you've received tonight is complimentary of the work that you've done, and I think it also complements our residents and their desire to have a top-notch facility, and they're willing to pay for it. So we'll see what the public hearing says, but I also support coming back with a phase 2 recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and when Jake and his staff has been talking about, hey, the fees are coming, to Councilman Whitlock's point, yeah, they all expect an increase. They know it's due.
Council, any additional questions, comments? Thank you, Garrett. And I do want to thank Councilman Cavanagh for helping push this conversation at the home court. You know, a lot of conversations over a lot of different issues, leading us down a lot of different paths for a lot of different purposes. hopefully we'll have a positive outcome overall. You know, we are talking about this cost recovery, but it is ultimately, you know, it's a system, you know, it, here, community center, wherever they go, are, you know, gyms with the West Data, you know, they all have a value, a use. Some we pay more for, some we pay different for. There's an average cost over all these things that we have to have us all pay for, you know, in order to be operational, to hit both what we want because it feels right, but also what we need because it's necessary. So look forward to that next phase of this conversation. Appreciate you and the team and all the hard work.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 22. Well, technically, I guess it's probably item 24 now, based on how we renumbered. But the discussion regarding the potential ballot question concerning levy to provide funding for firefighters, police officers, and prosecution. Council, for those that were here last week, you know, there was information that was presented by legal, and Kurt is here. So whether you were, I know those that weren't here probably went back and watched it and they're up to speed, but maybe it generated some questions, or you definitely have people here ready for those questions. If there's generalized comments or questions of another nature, I like to think that I am all commented out after say the city to really articulate the why, but I'm happy to go into further comments if council would like to on any of those. So I guess I'll first turn to those that weren't here last week and see if there's any level setting information that you felt you would like to get since you weren't present to ask any questions of legal.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavner.
I'll at least go first and acknowledge, despite my best efforts, I have not been able to watch your speech yet or last week's meeting. So it is on.
You told me you upgraded to the expensive
And
Wi-Fi.
the expensive Wi-Fi did not, well, I got about 6 seconds of the speech before it would shut down. And so despite it being the expensive streaming option, it did not actually stream the speech. So but just getting back into town, plan to get caught up on that this week. So I don't want to have the council that was here and was present have to go through the same presentation. So I will handle that piece on my own. But maybe what would help me, and this may have been covered, and it's at least my one question is, what should the voters pass this levy, what would be the process that the council could take to essentially reduce that amount over time? Can it be done piecemeal? Does it have to be done all at once? What action is required from the voters, if any? Because I think that to me is a critical piece of what our plan would be to, however long-term that is, to remove the levy off the taxpayer.
The very next year, you could reduce it down. You have the authority to set the budget or whatever you want. If you want to reduce our budget this year by 5 million, you have that power. So no council is beholden to make this stay forever as a budgetary number.
This is my one question for now. Thank you,
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, I did have a chance to watch your speech, hear your argument that you made, also listen to last week's presentation. And Kurt, I learned quite a bit about it, so I thought that was a great, succinct presentation. I appreciate it. I think I only had one kind of question, and I don't think I remember hearing it come up, and Mayor, maybe you can answer it, or Kurt. A question I have, if we're going to increase the levy by about 5 million a year for these stated purposes, is that, how do we ensure that that money, that 5 million, always goes towards public safety? Is it kind of earmarked for it? Is it something we just agree to do? I'm just trying to make sure I understand as we go forward with the budget, is this amount always going to be dedicated towards the 5 million? Or is it kind of fungible because it's general fund? I guess I'm wanting to understand the mechanisms of how that looks year after year after year. If this is, we're looking at a permanent ongoing levy, I just want to have some clarity around that. That was really kind of the only clarification and question I had tonight, is kind of structurally or mechanically how that works with the budget year after year.
I think the answer goes back to it's almost the exact same answer that I gave to Councilman Kavner. You know, in the context, it goes towards what we say it will go towards. But if at the following year, you all decide, no, we don't want to provide our own prosecution, we like to go back to the other way, and then there's no guarantee and then that council at that point in time say, let's reduce down our amount, or they would say, no, we don't. So council ultimately has the final say about all the revenue in terms of what it is for long-term. But assuming that it passes, then, the things that you will see in the following budget would be the fully funding of those 13 police officers. It would have a prosecution team in the budget, and it would have the increase in police sworn salaries. All I can do is tell you what will go in there. And if you all want to go down and if it gets approved and pass in the budget and then go reduce down the sworn police officer salaries at that time, that's on you, not on me. But ultimately, it's council's discretion at that point in time about what stays in what location over the period. But there's nothing you can do to, I guess, earmark it in that context. If for whatever reason something were to go away in the future, that money would not go away unless that council at that time said we no longer need that revenue since we no longer have that purpose. Make sense? Okay. Yeah. Thumbs up from finance. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
I had asked last time and was just curious to hear a bit more from Mr. Neri about kind of what his game plan would be on the prosecution side, how he would staff that, what that would look like. Could be high level, but I just really wanted to get a sense of that component.
Sure. Sure, certainly. Councilmember Schrader, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. So go back a few months, and the folks that are interested can go back. We talked about a prosecution team at some point in the future. What do we currently have and what's being currently provided, and how, if we were going to move that to a permanent in-house service, how would that look and what would that be? So currently, we contract with the city of Boise. They basically have a prosecution unit, and they staff currently approximately 2 prosecutors per courtroom. So judges in this district, judicial district, are divided into the criminal court or the misdemeanor criminal court system. And there's a number of courtrooms that are staffed on a daily basis. They have courtrooms for arraignments, for sentencings, for court trials, which are traffic tickets, infraction types of offenses, as well as jury trials for misdemeanor criminal offenses such as DUI, domestic battery, and those types of cases. They have pretrial. So they have a number between 5 and 6 active courtrooms every single day that are staffed by currently 2 attorneys for the city of Boise per courtroom based on the caseload volume. We're less than half of their total volume, but we are somewhere between 20 to 30% of their volume. So we incorporate a portion of that cost of personnel that they have as what we contract for both the in-court personnel of prosecution, as well as the out-of-court personnel for administrative support to prepare discovery, send all the information, evidence required by code to be sent to defense attorneys and things like that. So we pay for that portion of that cost. If we were absorbing that entire cost, now we then have to staff the courtrooms that are active each day. So that'd be 5 or 6 active courtrooms daily that need to be staffed by a personnel from the city. And then, of course, so that's at least 1 person per courtroom on a daily basis, again, plus the out-of-court personnel to support that. So we're looking at somewhere in the area of 5, potentially 6, depending on, and again, court's always evolving. I spoke with the Boise City attorney last week, and she told me that the court system, the 4th District Court, is looking to ask the legislature to fund another magistrate in the next year or 2, which would then expand the criminal system. So again, having to be responsive to that. Now, our only real, I wouldn't say pushback, our only real response that we can help alleviate some of that impact is if the court would be willing to adjust their scheduling some to narrow maybe where the Meridian cases are and the number of courtrooms that we may have to be in. Currently, they don't do that because they really only have 2 agencies that they're really satisfying, Ada County and the city of Boise. So we haven't explored that. That obviously would be a conversation we'd have between now and when this would take place to see if that's a possibility. But otherwise, we'd be looking at staffing essentially 5 or 6 courtrooms daily, as well as the necessary support staff. So we built some models with finance on what would that look like, and that's where the numbers have come from. The numbers that we have proposed in this levy are both the costs that we anticipate in addition to the contractual costs that we would save by no longer contracting with an outside entity. So when you took those two numbers together, that is approximately what we estimate it could cost us. Because if you remember when we had this conversation earlier, one of the challenges with this type of endeavor is that you can't really slowly grow into it. Really, the way the court system is set up, they have an expectation, courtrooms are set up, calendars are set, judges are set, they set up these calendars, and they aren't really designed to do a little at a time and go from 1 or 2 to 3, then 5, then 6. It really doesn't the way the court system works. So you really have to staff it at not quite full build out, but fairly close to it just to open the door. It just really is the only way that it can function. So that's what we sort of built this team from the outset, is what we take. Now, how we transition that and how we coordinate that with our current contracted entity, the city of Boise, we've had a lot of conversation on what that would look like. So we have some thoughts on that, but that's really what, from the public's perspective, that's what this prosecution would look like, is essentially 5 prosecutors, essentially. We already have one position of the police attorney that you funded for this current fiscal year. That would be part of this unit, but that's not a prosecutor. That's a separate position. So that's one of the people in the unit, but the rest of it are all prosecutors and support staff. And it's between 5 attorneys approximately and 4 to 5 support staff to support that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
I guess I would like to hear what would it look like to move this process forward? Like, what would the public process look like? If we could revisit that, I think we touched on that a little bit the last time, but I think that would be helpful. And then I do have some comments.
Well, from the public process, what we've put out there is to have 2 meetings where the public's invited to come and provide feedback on this proposal, and that would be, next Tuesday, as well as July 8th, or is that 9th, July 8th or 9th, whatever that Tuesday is, off the top of my head. I don't have a calendar that I'm looking at. So that would be the general opportunity. It would be our desire on that second one, the council would say yes or no, that they would like to put this on the ballot for consideration. There's still an official process after that would take place. But I think it would be good to have a general inclination that this is something that we're moving forward on or not going to move forward on at that point in time.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I would be happy to provide a comment on at least my initial impressions of this. I think that from what I've heard so far from my constituents, and I'd like to hear more from them, I hope they show up to these public hearings. Really, to me, public safety and that investment in our public safety is the foundation of a successful city. And what I like about this levy discussion so far is it really does center our voters in the driver's seat and allows them to have a really strong voice in what they want to see in the city. So for that reason alone, I'm supportive of this process, very strongly supportive so far. I'd love to hear from the public and hear what they have to say and hear their feedback. It really feels to me like and I think a lot of cities actually are just at an inflection point where they need to decide how important public safety is to them. Specifically with the police department, hearing your comments in the state of the city, certainly one of the most difficult professions out there. And I think it's great to allow our voters to have a voice on what they want PD's pay to be. I think that's really important. I think it's important for our voters to have a voice about maintaining our 13 firefighters that we got with our SAFER grant, and to hear from them on how important that is. And then I do think with the prosecution services, that's obviously a big change for us. That would be a big expansion of what we're doing. But what I like about that is our ability to chart our own course and really be in the driver's seat on the other side of, after arrests are made. So those are just my initial thoughts. I want to listen. I want to get feedback from the public. I think that's really important. So I'm in support of moving the process forward and hearing from the public.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I appreciate you kind of outlining what the process would look like. One of the things I think our city does really, really well is we listen to our bosses and providing ample opportunity to hear from them, both on their opinion on this proposal, and then certainly if it's something that was out to the voters, having that opportunity to weigh in. Last year, when we were having some really heavy conversations about the budget, I put together a postcard that I sent across my district saying, listen, I want to hear from you. What are your priorities? And it was police, and it was fire, and it was parks, and it was public art. But I also included an option because I thought this is what I'd want to hear. I thought this is what I would hear from my bosses, which is don't increase taxes at all. And I was really surprised that the vast majority of the cards and the surveys that I got back said, no, we're willing to spend a little bit more for police. We're willing to spend a little bit more for fire. We love that we live in a safe community. And so to me, that was eye-opening. I didn't expect that. And it's a good reminder that we need to go into this process with 2 ears and really hear from our community. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our residents at these 2 public hearings. And I think that their feedback is going to be really, really critical for how we best move forward. I appreciate you, Mayor, kind of lining out that process. Very clear, very transparent, with lots of access and options for people to be able to participate. No, summer sometimes is hard with vacations, and I think giving people 2 bites at the apple, at least, is a good way for us to hear. And certainly we can take testimony via text or via email or calls into City Hall, so making it super easy for our residents to let us know how they feel. Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure that I am clear on this. Because this is council acting legislatively, there's nothing that prevents us from any ex parte communication and meeting with people, talking about this. So council, if you want to meet with individuals or folks and get their opinion, or people grab you in the supermarket, want to grab you, also totally okay.
All perfectly legal.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I know it won't surprise anybody up here, but I'm completely in support of this public safety levy for all 3 reasons stated: our fire department, for our police, and our prosecution attorneys. It's been years I've been hoping that we could get to the point that we could have our own attorneys prosecuting Meridian cases, and prosecuting Meridian cases the way we want to see them prosecuted. We do things just a little different in the city of Meridian. And when we talk to people, whether it's National Night Out or other events, one of the first things I always hear from residents is they like our quality of life. They like being able to walk in our parks. They like the feeling of being safe, whether it's in their schools, their neighborhoods, or where they're shopping. And that comes with a price tag. And due to things that have been beyond our control, we find ourselves in a position that we need to bring forward a public safety levy to try to continue to keep that high level of service in our law enforcement, our fire department, and our prosecution services. And it can't be understated when we talk about prosecution services that we can have a phenomenal police department, but if we don't have a system of attorneys that then take all those cases and follow them through all the way through that court process, then we're not doing the job. So if anybody's confused by how that all works, it's part of the same operation. You can't have one without the other. So I'm completely behind this. I don't take it lightly that it's an increase. I wouldn't be supporting if I didn't think it was absolutely necessary for our community to try to keep the standards, the level, the professionalism we have in both departments. Trust me when I tell you, if we lose people because we can't pay them what they're worth, it costs us 10 times as much to then hire new folks and spend years trying to train them up to the levels of service that it takes to match what we've got today. We got some of the best people in the country, and we need to try to make sure we can keep them right where they're at. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
I just want to speak to the process. I think the state has boxed cities into a box. And we can't get out of that box on our own. We can't make decisions here outside of that box. But the state has also provided an avenue by which we can get out of that box. And it involves our bosses. It involves the taxpayers. So I think the process is sound. I think it gives us the ability to state the issue like you so eloquently did at your State of the City address, to lay the issue on the table and let the voters have their say in this. So that's the way out of this box that we find ourselves in. So I support the process. I also commend the staff, which has been through this with a fine-tooth comb down to the penny. And I appreciated the presentation last week and the opportunity to reflect on that over the past week. And I too hope that the public will come out and share their views and their comments. And we'll take that very seriously as we consider a path forward on how we get out of the box that we find ourselves in.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
I can't state it any more eloquently than my colleagues already have, but I do think, I just can't stress enough the opportunity that our bosses, our citizens get to basically say how this goes. And there's nothing more important than having such a wonderful city that has grown extremely fast. We have not kept up with public safety. And this is their opportunity to say, this is what we want. And I hear that time and time again. I mean, my district south of the freeway is growing like mad. And I hear time and time again, our taxes are lower than we ever thought they'd be when we moved here. And that they don't have a problem contributing, especially when they know I mean, we've got a great city, they love the amenities, but they love knowing that it's going directly to public safety and the prosecution team. I always kind of add that because it seems like when you're talking to people, they've picked up on police and fire, and then they've kind of like, I think they're not real sure what the prosecution involves. And so they really focus on police and fire, because when they dial 911 and they're expecting police, fire, they want as quick as possible. And that's what we will continue to be able to do, is to keep those officers and there when they need them. And that's, I think, the whole goal. But to have citizens be able to say that is crucial.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
I'm going to speak to the process as well a little bit. I think one thing that's interesting is the ultimate, whether this is successful or not, is not actually going to come down to those of us up here. It's going to come down to if the voters vote to approve it. What we're being asked to weigh in on is, do we want to bring the question to the voters? I think that's very unique. A lot of times legislators, policymakers are the ones whose vote makes the decision. That's not the case here. We're being asked to present the question to the voters. So I do appreciate the transparency in the process. I like that we're going to have 2 public hearings. I like that we had a presentation. We have some follow-up tonight. I hope the biggest message that comes from tonight's meeting is a real robust invitation to the public. We really want to hear you, because the question we'll be considering is, do we put it on the ballot? And so I hope that our citizens, the constituents we have, will come out, will let us know what they think. Very eager to hear what they have to say. These are weighty matters. It's significant, not just to where we stand with the budget process, but to the long-term view of where we go as a city. So very hopeful for that we get that feedback. But I think the process is open and transparent. We see a lot of cities looking for ways to find revenue through different mitigation fees and other things that, frankly, I much more appreciate the idea of posing the question and letting them weigh in. So I think the process is good, but I would like to use this opportunity to really a robust invitation to our constituents to please come out, tell us what you think, give us the feedback, because again, we're not making the decision if it passes or not. It's whether we're going to put the question to them. So anyway, I appreciate that.
And in a lot of ways, this local option tax at its core in concept. But there's certain things I think the council understands are their base responsibilities to do. You don't always ask the public for every decision that you make along the way. But in this case, there are definitely, we could still continue to have our prosecution services handled, that's a core that we're able to meet that. But if we want to do it the way we want to do it, or we still could have 3 people on each engine, moving forward and have all of our fire stations currently staffed. But if we want to have the best response force available, and I think the chief, highlighting that information, Chief Butterfield, to kind of showcase what you get in results. I think the groundwork has been laid in a lot of ways for what the outcomes can be through this process. And so while this is the process the legislature has outlined for us, I've always been a proponent of asking the voters where it makes sense to do things, especially, when they just had their wisdom to expand from 4 to 6 council members. Sometimes, we operate fine with 4, but 6 just is that much better in that context. And it's great input points in that context. And if I misspoke earlier and I said 13 officers, I did mean firefighters in that context, just so we're clear about what is going to be coming if this makes it onto the ballot. But I hear what all council's saying. They want 2 years over the next 3 weeks to be the predominant, but I'm sure you'll have plenty of conversations here and there and everywhere along the way as we consider this. We will get a press release out officially highlighting the 2 weeks that we'll be taking public comments on this topic, so that the community it'll go out in our immediate newsletter, electronic newsletter. Fortunately, we can't really put it out in our utility billing because it just doesn't coincide with when things hit. So that won't make it into the utility billing inserts, but we reserved future engagement through that means if this does make it onto the ballot appropriately. So we'll take those steps and we'll have a conversation next week on this topic. Yeah, appreciate it. So with that, we'll move on to the intergovernment and joint powers agreement concerning countywide development impact fees discussion. Ask Kurt to come on back up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Kurt Starn with the City Attorney's Office. So this is a topic that is well familiar to you at this point. We had an in-depth presentation regarding the potential for countywide development impact fees in December, and then you had a conversation about 2 weeks ago as well. Back this evening for a couple reasons. One is to bring the topic to a head and to see how the council would like to proceed, or if you would like to proceed at all. But also there were some questions 2 weeks ago in particular relative to the proposed corridor development impact fees. I want to provide a little bit of information about that this evening. I believe Leon Letson from the county is available remotely as well if there's some questions for him. So I'll do the best I can to articulate the county's thought process relative to the corridor fee. And then really this is set up as an action item tonight. If you would like to take action, you may. I'll describe that a little bit later, but you can take action tonight, or perhaps we need to make some last minute adjustments, in which case we can bring it back to you in a couple weeks on the consent agenda, or whatever direction you might have for us. But I'm going to ask, Chris is always ahead of me. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So with regard to the corridor fee, some discussion relative, this maybe for context, the 3 fees that the county is proposing that would require the participation of all the incorporated cities include a fee for the jail, an impact fee associated with the EMS district, and then a fee relative to the coroner's office and the services provided by that office. So under the statutory framework that we all operate in, which is known as the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act, the purpose of that act is to fund public facilities. I'll emphasize that particular term, public facilities, that are needed to serve growth. And we've had discussions in the past about that philosophy of growth paying for growth. So that's what the Impact Fee Act is about. And importantly for our discussion about the coroner's office in particular is that the term public facilities has a very precise definition within the statute. And there are multiple categories. I'm not going to talk about all of them because they're not relevant to our conversation tonight, but it'd be things like water or sewer or parks and things of that nature. But the category or the portion of the definition for public facilities that's relevant to our discussion is the one that's in that last bullet point that defines public facilities as including, among other things, public safety facilities, comma, including law enforcement, fire stations and apparatus, emergency medical and rescue, and street lighting facilities. So you'll note that just on its surface, it doesn't say anything about coroner facilities or coroner functions, which leads you to kind of one of two ways to approach this. One is an argument that the coroner function falls under law enforcement, and I think that's really the county's take on this. A different way to possibly look at it is that to read the language is saying it includes public safety facilities, and there are some examples provided in the statute, including law enforcement. I think that there's some risk in interpreting that way. I like the, better if the legislatures included specific subcategories were best. It's more prudent to stick within those particular subcategories. And I think the county is really making the argument that the coroner function does fall within law enforcement. In discussions with the county, this stems back to last year prior to that December presentation. The county really, when they articulate why they believe that to be the case and why a fee for the coroner's office would be defensible, they really point to two portions of the Idaho Code or sections of code that they think fits within that category. The first is Title 19, Chapter 43 of Idaho Code. That's one of the main areas of Idaho law that talks about what the coroner does. It basically, and so these all relate to law enforcement, and arguably they may or may not constitute law enforcement. But the first is, the coroner, just a summary, high-level summary of what Title 19, Chapter 43 talks about are the bullet points on your screen here right now. Is that the coroner is required to investigate certain deaths, and it explicitly talks about homicides, and it talks about suspicious deaths. So that's part one. Part two is the coroner has quite a bit of authority in terms of conducting inquest and really performing almost judicial or quasi-judicial functions, including summoning jurors to serve for the inquest, can issue subpoenas for witnesses to appear at the inquest, can compel witnesses to attend and testify at the inquest, similar to what a magistrate or a district court judge would be able to do. And if the jury finds that the person in question, the deceased, was killed by another, the coroner is compelled by law to actually, and has the authority to issue an arrest warrant for that person that is suspected or that the jury in the inquest determined was responsible for the death. So those all sort of have the feel and flavor of law enforcement, or at least maybe a judicial type feel and flavor. They don't precisely fall within the definitions per se of law enforcement. Certainly kind of have that, kind of have some overlap there. The other section of law that the county has pointed to in past conversations of why they believe the coroner's function is encompassed within the definition of law enforcement, and therefore eligible for impact fees, is Title 31, Chapter 43, which has some interesting provisions in terms of what happens if something happens to the sheriff. And the first one is when the sheriff, whether he or she declares a conflict of interest in a topic, this particular section of code basically authorizes the coroner to act as the substitute for the county sheriff. And when he or she, meaning the coroner, performs that role, the statute is clear that the coroner possesses all the same powers as the sheriff during that point in time. So clearly that does, bleed into the law enforcement category, so to speak. The last section I'll point to, the county hasn't really mentioned this, but I'll mention it because it's similar to what we just talked about. But in this case, the example I just gave you a moment ago is when the sheriff declares that he or she has a conflict of interest, then the coroner steps in. This is similar, but this is where others determine that the sheriff has an issue. And, and Idaho has an interesting provision that basically the coroner is the only elected official or individual that can arrest the sheriff. And so that's essentially what this language is about, is if the sheriff is a party to an action, this is an artful way to say it, but if the sheriff is a party to an action or proceeding, and then the process and orders that are related thereto fall to the coroner. And that includes the potential for arresting a sheriff for unlawful activity. So those are the sections. The first the first two I mentioned in particular are the sections that the county points to that as to why the coroner's function fits within law enforcement. And because it fits within law enforcement, it is one of the public facilities that can be paid for, or category of public facilities that can be paid for by impact fees. The long and short of it is, this is never been litigated to the best of my knowledge. It's never been challenged. And so that we don't have a bright line rule. There is no good definition in the Impact Fee Act or elsewhere about what law enforcement means. And so there's, as you often hear from attorneys, there's lots of gray area and room for argument here. So the county, I think, has made a fair argument as to why the coroner fee could fit within the Impact Fee Act. It's certainly not a black and white question or a black and white answer. There's risks there, as Mayor Simonson spoke about a couple weeks ago. Really until you're challenged and the court makes a decision, we don't know the definitive answer. And that's sort of the circumstance we're dealing with. So the three agreements you have before you tonight that you may or may not wish to act upon, I misspoke, the two agreements you have before you tonight. One is the agreement between the city and the EMS district. And just to refresh memories, and then for those that might be watching now or later, we talked about a four-step process for the city to be a good partner with the county, along with other incorporated cities in Ada County. So a four-step type process is incremental and sort of the judicious way to proceed would be to enter into an agreement with the county that basically says not much more than we're going to make use of the county's Impact Advisory Committee as our committee for this purpose, and that we will commit to considering the possibility of adopting the CIPs for the coroner, for the EMS, and for the jail. Step two, if we proceeded, would be actually to consider the CIPs. That would come later. It'd be part of a public hearing process and an actual amendment, formal amendment to the city's comprehensive plan. Step three is we would pause until other cities catch up, and because this takes all the cities to participate to make this work. And so we would pause at that point until other cities have adopted the CIPs and adopted ordinances to implement such a fee. And then step four for us at that point would be to consider the possibility, you're not committed, this council and future councils are not committed to do anything, but you would consider as part of step four the possibility of adopting an ordinance that would implement the countywide impact fees within Meridian. So we're talking about step one only. That includes two agreements. The first is with the EMS district. That stands by itself. There's no correlation or any connection to the coroner function. So that agreement really is not impacted by this, the issue of the coroner's office and whether it should be included or not. The second agreement, however, also between the city and the county, does deal with both CIPs, one for the jail that's associated with the jail and one that's associated with the coroner's office. And so to the extent the city council does not wish to entertain the idea of a fee for the coroner's office, you have a couple ways, or you still have questions about that. You have a few ways to potentially approach that. I've listed three. You may have some other ideas here tonight as well. One is there's really, even if you still have some concerns relative to the coroner's office, there's no real impediment necessarily or downside, to use that phrase, of approving the agreement as it sits, because really all it obligates the city to do is to consider the CIP at another date as part of a public hearing process. So on the one hand, you could even approve that agreement now, even though you may have some lingering questions relative to the coroner's office. It doesn't commit the city to do anything, and you can have a more in-depth conversation about that topic when you actually consider the CIP. So that is an alternative. Converse, or as an alternative to that, if you're convinced now that the coroner's office ought not be included, and we don't want to waste people's time, and that's just the conclusion of the council, yet you want to proceed with other aspects of the county's proposal, a different alternative would be number two listed there, which is we can direct staff to modify the agreement with the county to delete all references to the coroner's office and the coroner CIP. We need a little time to make that happen. We bring it back to you in a couple weeks on the consent agenda, minus any references to the coroner fee, and we proceed accordingly. And lastly, you may decide that you don't have enough information yet about this topic or other topics to do any of those things, and perhaps you need to hear from the county, in more detail tonight or in another setting. So Those are a few potential alternatives. You may have some other thoughts as well on how to best proceed. As I mentioned, I think if he was good enough to hang with us for the night, Mr. Letson was going to join us remotely. So I'm happy to answer questions you might have. Hopefully, Mr. Letson's available if you have questions for the county. And Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Council, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
A comment, and then I do have two questions. I do think there's some harm in considering an agreement if we're not going to get there. Like, I don't want to lead on like partners in government to count on something that they think is coming from us if we're not going to get there. So I do think there's a risk in that. My questions would be, number one, if we decided to move forward on the coroner CIP and we are wrong, what is the risk to the city? And then my second question would be, can we just, maybe get, proactively ask the Attorney General or someone else to provide a legal opinion about this matter? Like, is there a resource available to us that we could use to try to get to the bottom of the coroner piece specifically?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Strader. Excellent questions. So with regard to, let me start with the last question, and I'll work my ways backwards. You might have to remind me to the topics. I've given some thought to that as well. I think the county's in the best position to do that if they choose. Those are two thoughts that are one of the two things you mentioned are thoughts that occurred to me as well. Potentially, the county could ask the Attorney General's office for an opinion, and the Attorney General may choose to do so. So that's an option that the county could choose to pursue. Probably would make sense for the county to do so since they're proposing a fee on a countywide basis, and we're one piece of that puzzle. The second potential alternative would be to go to the district court now with the declaratory judgment action and ask the court basically to decide now, absent a disagreement, but as a matter of law, does a coroner impact fee comply with the Impact Fee Act? So under Idaho law, parties, including counties, can seek a declaratory judgment that declares what the law is with respect to their rights under that law. So those are a couple options that might be available to the county. With regard to, I think this working backwards, second question in terms of risk to the city, there's probably little risk to the city in terms of considering the coroner CIP in the sense that it's a planning document that says, the community is growing in a certain way at a certain rate, and it generates demand for facilities. Here's what that looks like. Here's the analysis. And to the extent, certainly no harm in considering such a CIP. And even to the extent we adopt the CIP and include it as part of the comprehensive plan, that really is just a planning document and doesn't have, force of a fee ordinance or any ordinance behind it. It's a planning instrument. I don't think there's risk to the city or significant risk to the city relative to the CIP. Where the risk comes in is if that last step is taken, which I referred to as step 4, if the city adopts an ordinance and we start to, under the force of law, collect impact fees from people that are developing within our community, and a court that later decides that is illegal, then that has lots of legal implications for the city and for the county. As we talked about briefly in some previous discussions, one of our requirements of the county is that we have an identification and hold harmless provision, but I don't want to, without getting into great detail about that, there are some limitations to that under the Idaho Constitution, and I don't want to, completely rely upon that as a safe harbor for the city. So we should proceed, with our eyes wide open to the extent, particularly to the extent we actually get to the point of considering implementing a coroner-related fee that might be challenged.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Kurt, can you go back to, it might have been your first slide that was referencing the section of code, back a little further, right there. Public safety facilities, in your research, was that term defined in the law? Because it would seem that a coroner facility could fall under either law enforcement, or is it a public safety facility? Did you look at that or examine that at all?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Taylor. So there's no case law on this, so at the appellate level, and I'm not aware even at the district court level, but no appellate cases. So and the legislative history is not particularly helpful. The legislature clearly went to great lengths to narrow what these fees could be applied to. And we have this discussion frequently in the context of school districts, for example. The legislature has explicitly and intentionally left school districts off this list, and so the list, the list that the legislature has provided is somewhat narrow and closely defined. But to answer your question, directly, I've not found anything that provides a better definition in terms of public facility or law enforcement than what you're reading here. And this is directly, that is a quote out of the statute, but there's no additional clarification beyond that.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Taylor.
Appreciate the kind of walking us through the coroner's responsibilities and duties. It was very informative. I felt like I learned it. I understand why it's kind of a bit of a gray area. Seems to me I feel like it's pretty sound in terms of that a coroner could be considered a law enforcement entity given the responsibilities that they're allowed to do under statute. I guess the question I would have for you would be, if we get to a point where we are collecting impact fees and the court says, no, you can't do that, is the liability with the city or would it be more so with the county because it's their impact fee and we're more of a facilitator of collecting them?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Taylor. Likely it'll be both, because in the sense that the county, for sure, because they're front and center collecting the fee and spending it or collecting it for particular purposes. But the city and other cities, if they choose to participate as well, and we've always said that, sort of all need to participate or it won't happen. So other cities would be in the same boat. I guess we wouldn't be alone, but I would say that, to answer your question, the city would be directly involved in that litigation because it's a city ordinance that allowed or is compelling the payment of that fee. And so, we're likely involved directly in that litigation. We would then turn to the county and contractually point to our contractual provision that says they need to defend and identify the city. And we would rely upon that to put the county in the driver's seat to defend the action and to the extent there's an adverse judgment, to actually make the city whole as well. But as I indicated, there's some limitations on those types of clauses under the Idaho Constitution.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Whitlock.
Kurt, I appreciate it as you went through this. You said public safety facilities, comma.
Yes.
Including law enforcement, fire stations, but in all the subsequent slides, it talks about duties of the coroner. And I don't know that apparatus or emergency medical or rescue or streetlights are treated similarly in Idaho code with definitions of duties. So I'm still in a gray area in terms of public safety facilities when all we have referenced in other sections of code are duties related to if the sheriff has a conflict of interest or a coroner's inquest or things like that, versus here's an apparatus, here's a fire station, here are streetlights. So is there anything you can do or say to help bridge that gap for me or get past this comma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Whitlock. I fully understand your point and your question. I think the most conservative, and I'm not sure I can bridge that gap. Really, the most conservative, direct way to read that language from my perspective would be, the legislature basically has said you can use impact fees for certain things, water, sewer, parks, and this category. And the way I read this language and the way sort of statutory interpretation works, I would read it to say public safety facilities and the comma meeting. Really, this is going a bit far, but I'm going to say it for just to make the point, limited to law enforcement, fire stations and apparatus, emergency medical, rescue, and street lighting functions. Because they didn't say including, but they didn't use the language of including without limitation or including but not limited to. They used the word including. And so that sort of gives you, this is your subset that you're going to work with. So if they use language like including but not limited to or without limitation, I would have a different interpretation about it. So really that's one that lawyers could argue about and different judges could likely come to different conclusions about. But the most conservative reading of that language is, if you want to just sort of be in a safe harbor, would be, we know the legislature has intended that law enforcement is a public safety facility. Fire stations and apparatus qualify under that definition, likewise for EMS and streetlights.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
I think I'm still struggling. I think similar to Councilman Whitlock, I'm still struggling. And I do feel like this is an example where I think the county being proactive and getting some clarity on this is the best thing to do, to me. I don't want to go down the path of considering an agreement, saying, well, we can consider this agreement, but the real risk to the city is when we actually implement an ordinance. Once you get the ball rolling on something, it kind of takes on a life of its own. And I don't want our partners at the county to rely on us on this coroner one specifically if we haven't gotten clarity. It sounds like there are two paths to getting that they could pursue. They can get an opinion from the Attorney General. That's an option that you just said that they could do, or they could go to a district court, it sounds like. I'd love for us to go back to the county and say, hey, we'd like you to try to pursue one of these two options to get some clarity on this because we're concerned. We think it's a gray area. What I don't want to do is like go all the way down the path, embrace our own interpretation, and then end up taking on risk to the city because ultimately we end up implementing these impact fees. Like, I think we should just get clarity on this. That's where I'm at on the coroner one.
Mr. Mayor and Council, as you're thinking about that and deliberating, maybe that makes perfect sense and the council will make that decision. Sort of a corollary to that thought process would be then, what you may want to think about as you're thinking about this and deliberating, if we pursue the thought that Councilmember Strader just presented, the corollary to that is, do we want to do anything with the other two fees at this time, EMS and the jail, or do you want to keep them all together until we have better clarity relative to the coroner? So that'd be a related question that you may want to think about as you deliberate and reach your decision.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
On that line of thinking, if we opt to set aside the coroner question and pursue the others, and we move down that path, if we do get that additional clarity that gives us assurance that all is well, do we just come back with another agreement that's specific to the coroner that we would pass? And then kind of beyond that, does that create problems for the county working with other municipalities who have maybe chosen a different approach? Because I'm just wondering if or Garden City, Boise, CUNA, they pursue kind of the similar path and we've kind of got a bit of a different way of getting there. Does that create a problem if we all have sort of different pathways to getting to the same goal? Or does it need to be the same with every municipality?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Taylor. I think there were sort of two questions there, basically, but with regard to, I'll answer the first, which is, if we, let's say hypothetically, one of the scenarios is we leave the coroner's fee out of the agreement today, but let's say hypothetically the county gets an opinion from the Attorney General's office in 6 weeks and says that this is acceptable. To answer that part of the question, yes, the city could either enter into a new agreement at that time or amend the agreement that excluded the coroner's office, and we could catch up with the process there. To the second question as to impacts with other cities and the county overall, what I heard the county say in previous discussions, and just makes sense to me, at a 10,000-foot level, is that I think Mr. Rutherford in particular made a comment very similar to what I'm going to say now. It's sort of, all the cities need to participate or it won't happen. So I think the county is essentially, what I've heard the county say is that, as we get farther into the process, if a city chooses not to participate, hypothetically, in the coroner's fee, likely the county, what I heard Mr. Rutherford say is likely the county would not pursue that fee because they want unanimity, need unanimity to have, truly a county-wide fee. So I think the county, I don't want to speak for them, although Mr. Letson, may be available online if he'd like to speak. What I've heard is that if all the cities are not in agreement on a particular fee, the county would not likely pursue that to the finish line.
Mayor, this is Leon Letson with Ada County.
Mr. Hudson.
Sorry, I've been on mute trying not to step on Kurt's toes as he presented to you. So thank you for your time. And Kurt, thanks for a very detailed presentation on the corner. When I read it, I was like, well, this is pretty clear. This works as an impact fee. But, you know, I understand we're still kind of wrestling with that gray area. You know, pursuing a advice letter from the Attorney General on this issue, we're happy to pursue that. You know, I would like to back up and just remind Mayor and Council that this agreement is really more of a pre-agreement than anything else. You know, you still would need to go through the process of amending your comprehensive plan to bring these CIPs into your guiding document, the comprehensive plan. So I guess I would ask, give us an opportunity to prove that this actually fits. Let's not stop the process now, or I mean, best case would be alternative one here, where we can have you agree to consider all of them. And in the event that this advice letter comes back and some negative take on the corner, then that's pretty easy for us to remove it from everybody's consideration, because we're obviously not going to do anything that violates state law. I guess alternative two, we could accept as well. We have had Eagle and Star already adopt the corner CIP into their comprehensive plan. Again, that doesn't affect them in any way until they actually establish an ordinance and start collecting a fee. It's really just, we acknowledge this plan is relevant in terms of how the corner functions and serves our community, and what we should do to protect it, really. I mean, that's a rough paraphrase of what the purpose of the CIP and the comp plan does, but that is what it's doing there. So again, I would hope we could go for one here and give us a chance to pursue that advice from the Attorney General, if that's the will of the council here. But I guess worst case, I would hope we could get to number two tonight at least, to allow us to continue making progress on the other two CIPs and the services provided through those.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I think it's really just so everyone's going in with their eyes open, right? So if the county understands that we're still considering the agreements, but that the city, at least I'm the only one so far, so I don't know if other council members want that opinion from the Attorney General. I would like something like that, personally. That would make me feel more comfortable, but I would be okay with, as long as we're communicating really clearly to you, our partners at the county, like this is something that we would like to see, an outside opinion to interpret this. I'm okay with still pursuing it, as long as you understand that, you know, if we don't get a favorable opinion, then that would jeopardize, you know, that agreement, that component. I just didn't want to lead somebody astray. That's all.
Sorry. This is the trouble of virtual meetings or virtual attendance. Yes, no, I get it. And again, you know, the law's the law and we're going to follow it. You know, we believe we're in a good place on the corner here. And again, I would point to some of the things in Kurt's presentation that got us there. But yeah, I mean, end of the day, we have to follow the law. We can't, we would remove that immediately if it was determined to not be illegal, a service eligible for impact fees.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
So, hey, Leon, you can stay on if you want. Can you just give council some understanding? Because this question has come up a little bit. So kind of walk the council through, what actions have you taken to try and seek some clarification on the corner piece? And if you haven't done anything, that's fine. But I think it's important that before we take an action tonight, to have some understanding is what the county's actions would be following tonight's decision, to start working towards providing some of us that clarity and confidence.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember. So, you know, I will just speak to the hours and rooms with our attorneys and Kurt and his team to hash out this. I think we produced, I can't remember how many pages that document was, Kurt, in terms of your questions about the impact fees and our thoughts on how we would answer those questions. And there was an extensive section dedicated to the corner. So, I mean, at this point, it hasn't risen above the level of our respective legal teams. Again, the attorney general option is, that's the first time I've heard of that, and I'm happy to go pursue that. And I don't know how quickly he's turning out advice letters, but as quickly as I can get one, I will work to get it to you. Again, if we need that as the final say on this, then we'll work hard to give that to you, because it obviously betters our position with every jurisdiction that we're working with. But at this point, it's just been the legal teams of Ada County and Meridian kind of kicking this back and forth, and obviously we're coming down on different sides of that a little bit, and that's where it's at.
Thanks for that, Leon. Appreciate it.
So council, would you like us to put something on the agenda in the future for further feedback, or do you want to move forward on anything at this time?
Mayor, I'll weigh in on kind of my thought. I'm supportive of moving forward with this process. I want to commend Councilmember Strader. What I was hearing from her is we didn't want to lead our partners astray in saying, by agreeing to do this, that means we've bought all in. And then to come back and say, hey, we've got some concerns here, and to say, well, you told us early on that you were in support of. I appreciate, I think, that level of diligence and reminder to our county friends. I look at this as beginning the process. I'm supportive of having the conversation. Quite frankly, I'm going to need more than just a letter from the Attorney General or from a district court weighing in. I'm going to want to hear from our citizens on this. I mean, I think this is a long process that's going to involve a lot of engagement with a lot of different folks, but I'm open to at least beginning it. So I'm coming from Kurt. I'm in support of approving the agreements, beginning this process, recognizing that before any action would be taken on any impact fees, corner or otherwise, there's going to be a robust process where council will feel very confident in any decision that we make, whether it's in support or in opposition.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councilman Cavanagh on that. I think it's important to get the process moving. I know that by doing that, we're not tying our hands completely to the end goal here by the county, but I think it's been discussed enough. I think there's been enough feedback. I'm comfortable moving ahead with what we have, but getting additional outside clarification on this question about the corner and those fees, that's great. That's just going to make us more comfortable. I think everyone will like what we hear, or at least we'll know what we should do based on that. And I do think that responsibility lies with the county to clarify that. Obviously, we can read the law, we can have our opinions about what it means, but if we need that additional clarification, I think we should emphasize to the county that that's their responsibility to get that clarification, but we're going to need that to reach that final conclusion. So I am supportive of tonight moving ahead with these agreements.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
not to make this drag on any longer, but it's been very well discussed and torn apart here tonight. And very simply, I agree with moving ahead with these agreements at this time.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
I don't know if we're going to vote, but I'm fine with moving forward so long as the county's been on. And I appreciate you joining the meeting, by the way. Thank you very much. They have heard us, they understand, and it sounds like they're willing to pursue an advice letter or a district court judgment of some sort to weigh in on it. That's okay to me, as long as you guys understand that that's something that at least one person definitely would like to have. So I'm okay with that, as long as everyone's expectations are set and people won't be disappointed if it's not the outcome they want. I'm okay with it.
So council, what would you like to, is there a motion? Let's have to come back on.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, why don't you bring the agreement back on consent, and that will give council an opportunity to review before any votes taken.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to our ordinances. First up is ordinance number 25-2086. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to 330 North Linder, H 2024-0048, annexing Lot 3 of Hepper's Acre subdivision. A recorded plat on file in Book 20 of Plats, page 1298, records of Ada County, Idaho, and a portion of the southeast quarter of Section 12, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 0.983 acres of such real property from R1 to the IL zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance. Providing the copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required, as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that'd like it read in its entirety? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton. Strader. Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Next up is ordinance number 25-2087. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Mr. Mayor, on the last item, there was no motion.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
I'd move that we approve ordinance number 25-2086.
Second.
The motion second to approve ordinance number 25-2086. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
is it ordinance 25-2086 or is it ordinance 25-2087? Sorry, I'm a little confused.
We're going back to 2086 that didn't have an official motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton. Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carry, and the item is agreed to. Now we'll go into ordinance number 25-2087. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance annexing a parcel of land located in a portion of the northeast quarter of Section 16, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 5 acres of such real property from RUT to the IL zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that'd like it read in its entirety? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move that we approve ordinance number 25-2087.
Second.
I have a motion second to approve ordinance number 25-2087. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton. Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Council, we've reached the end of our agenda. One last item.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
2 quick last items. Just a reminder, it's Dairy Days, and so lots of great activities to be participating in, and I look forward to seeing some of you at the parade. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.